Good afternoon and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. Today we have a proposed development at 428 Main Street West in Hamilton. I am Edward Winter, urban designer at the City of Hamilton, hosting this meeting, and David Cluzio, the chair of the DRP, will chair the meeting. In addition to our panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing today. Members of the public are welcome here to observe, but no comments or questions from the public today. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the City of Hamilton's DRP webpage. Lastly, a reminder to panelists to keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. Thank you everyone for attending the design review panel. David, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Edward. Good afternoon and welcome. Edward, can you confirm that the session is being recorded?
Yes, I confirm we are recording.
And no changes to the agenda today?
No, just Dana in and Eldon out.
Okay. And I'm asking if any panelists have any conflict of interest, and I'll take silence as indication that there is none. Okay, on the agenda today is the review of 428 Main Street West. The lead planner on the file is Chris Hampson Curtis, who is available to answer any policy questions, and Edward Winter will make a brief presentation. Good afternoon, Edward. We're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Today we are looking at a proposed multi-dwelling at 428 Main Street West. The proposal is for a 9-story multiple dwelling with 182 resident units, supported with 102 parking spaces in an underground garage. Here we see the subject site, 1 block east of Dundurn along Main Street West, which is, of course, a major corridor, a primary corridor. Outside of the downtown area, we are in the Strathcona secondary plan. This is a view of the site, which is currently vacant from the south. This is looking southeast from New Street across the corner of the site. Conceptual site plan showing a building along Main Street and access through an alley off of New Street with circulation in behind. There is some stepping and terracing stepping up from New Street and to the east with the existing resident building along Main Street. As mentioned, the Strathcona secondary plan shows both stable residential neighborhoods shown in the orange and areas that are looking for intensification along corridors shown in the blue. Our site is along Main Street in the blue corridor. So for today, we have 4 questions asking to the panel. First one, how well does the rear yard location for the primary entrance work within the lot pattern of the community? And is there a need to address the compatibility of the functioning of the southern entrance with the private rear yards that are adjacent? Does the north facade facing Main Street work to ensure building entrances are visible from the street edge and promoting shelter? How does the location of the entrance and loading and drop-off space function together? And is there screening needed? Does the proposed loading staging area adjacent to the primary entrance give cause for concern or warrant additional buffering or revision to the location? And lastly, does the existing sidewalk condition along Main Street provide for comfortable walk and animated street edge along Main Street? We do have our Main Street revitalization project underway, and this is an area of change and intensification as there are other projects along the street. So there is, while right now, not a great pedestrian volume along here, but it is an area that is sought to have increase in pedestrian activity. I'll end my presentation there.
I guess then the next question is, or the next presentation by the proponent, if that could start. And I would ask them to keep their presentation under 10 minutes as well.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, perfect. All right, so my name's Scott Beatty. I'm a registered professional planner with Urban Solutions, and it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of New Horizon Development Group for the proposal at 428 Main Street West. Just before I hand it off to the architect for the balance of the presentation, I just wanted to quickly take you through a bit of the history of the project. In the initial site plan submission that was made for this site, we were proposing a 10-story multiple dwelling that contained 186 dwelling units and 106 parking spaces. And you can see the unit breakdown there. This building had a 5-story podium with a 10-story portion facing the northern property line and had step backs implemented at the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, and 10th stories. And the podium notably did not extend to the easterly lot line. Since that initial submission, we got comments back from development planning and urban design through the site plan process, and we're able to have a couple meetings with staff to really hear their concerns and make adjustments to the concept accordingly, which is now how we've arrived at the concept before you today. So we reduced that 10-story height to 9 stories. Making it 182 dwelling units with 105 parking spaces. You can see the 2 bedrooms and studio bedroom units were increased and 1 bedroom plus 10 were decreased. That 5-story podium was reduced down to 3 stories, and that 10-story portion facing the northern property line was reduced down to 6 stories. While the same general angular planes are applied, this just a reduction in step backs used. So now it's a step back at the 3rd, 6th, and 9th story, with that podium now extending right to that easterly lot line in order to create a nice interface along Main Street West with a animated street wall. I'll hand it over, or sorry, we'll go to the next slide quickly. This just gives you an idea of the rendering of that first concept. So you see that high 5-story podium, that 10-story height there. And then if we flip to the next, you see that that's been brought down in height. We have the podium down at 3 stories now, more in line with those low dwellings to the east. And that materiality sort of expanded upwards. Again, with the extension of that podium street wall to the east as well. And I'll hand it over to Barry Graziani. I just think you're muted, guys.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Okay, yes. Hi, so I'm actually Cassandra Kopf. I'll be walking you through this presentation, and Barry is sitting here on my right. So this is a site plan you've already seen, and as Scott sort of mentioned, that the terracing has been reduced from the initial concept. It still respects the angular planes and is considerate of the shadow impact on the neighboring properties. The building does now extend to the eastern property line, which does set us up for a continuous street wall for any potential future developments. Servicing and vehicular access is still off of the laneway, the existing laneway on the north side. And it takes advantage of that lane off of New Street, keeping all services internalized on the property. The courtyard that's now created between the building and the neighborhood rear yards will not only be utilized to keep the services and vehicular movements discreet, but also establishes a secluded and private outdoor amenity area for the building residents. This is just our north elevation showing that angular plane taken from New Street on the right-hand side of your screen at an 80% of the New Street right-of-way. And the west elevation, which shows two angular planes, one coming from on the left-hand side from our northern lot line, and from the right side from Main Street, taking 80% of the Main Street right-of-way. We have 2 levels of below-grade parking for residents and visitors, provided at a ratio of 0.6 per unit. We'll also be including resident bike locker rooms on the P1 level. The ground floor you'll see is animated along Main Street with residential units, as well as wrapping around the building onto the laneway with the adjacent neighboring residential. We have a legend on the right-hand side, but just to highlight that pink is for a studio unit, blue is for a 1-bedroom den. On the other slides, you'll see that yellow is for a 2-bedroom. And here we also show green as our garbage waste room and orange for our amenity. There is a primary entrance off of Main Street, which connects to a throughway lobby, providing access to the courtyard and the courtyard programming. As mentioned, servicing loading occurs at the rear of the site, as well as the ramp access to the underground, and a pickup drop-off area is also internalized. This reduces the traffic impact coming off of Main Street. There is a large outdoor amenity area, which is located on the eastern lot line and is contiguous with our indoor amenity. The residential units are set back from Main Street about 3 meters, which achieves a personal separation for the public realm. This graphic section sort of just distinguishes that private versus public separation. So not only is the building cantilevered over the ground level and their patio units, their patios, are also raised approximately 900 millimeters off of the sidewalk level. So this elevation keeps eyes on the street, but also provides a sense of security for the residents. Privacy plantings and the planted boulevard enhance the distance between these private patios and then the urban braille clearway. Moving up the building, this is our 2nd and 3rd level. There are 3 typical floor plates. We have a range of units. You've already seen the breakdown, but the studios are ranging in size from about 35 to 45 meters squared. A 1-bedroom is about 45 to 55 meters squared, and a 2-bedroom about 55 to 65 meters squared. On the upper level, 4th to 6th, you start to see our setbacks along the east, west, and southern sides. And then the upper floor is 7th to 9th, which creates a floor plate approximately only 725 meters squared. This is our south-facing elevation. You see the 3rd story street wall defines the built form relationship with the residential context. The use of masonry is an intentional nod to the Strathcona neighborhood. Masonry is also carried up to the 4th and 6th level, which enhances that perception of only being a 6-story building. By using the white cladding on the 7th to 9th story and the mechanical penthouse will help to minimize the visual impact in the sky. And the residential lobby is located slightly offset of center and identified with a structural framed canopy. This is the west-facing elevation where you can see the continuation of that 3rd story datum along New Street. Our north-facing elevation has the animated laneway with residents on that level, a covered patio and covered lobby entrance, and then the amenity would occur on the left-hand side of the screen. The east-facing elevation, we do show a solid wall up to the 3rd story. That's due to the reduced lot line setback. Once we terrace above, then there are windows. And then just to wrap up on our building elevations, this is the view along Main Street. You get to see the animated ground floor, the defined lobby entrance, the accentuated 6-story built form, and our defined 3rd-story street wall. The view from New Street looking into the laneway, you see the quiet internalized laneway, the residential presence at grade, an easy transition to the adjacent neighborhood. And due to the large setback, you really get a sense of this only being a 6-story building from this view. I'm going to pass it now over to Leanne, our landscape architect on the file.
Just want to flag that you're out of time, so this should be brief.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. Hi, everybody. I'm Leanne from White House Urban Design. I just have 3 slides. This one, it's just a different version of what you've already seen. This is a preliminary landscape plan. The amenity space at the rear, Cassandra noted that it's adjacent to the interior amenity space, which is a nice feature for the residents living there. And having that space tucked away behind the building gives it that rear yard, backyard feel that's in keeping with the Strathcona neighborhood, the adjacent properties there. Next slide. This one speaks to circulation. This one, and then we can flip to the next one, then back here. This is pedestrian, and then we can go back to the vehicular one, and it highlights how the circulation is very efficient, but also safe for the pedestrians there, because cars can come in and they can drop off and go into the underground parking. Once somebody is dropped off within the courtyard, they can enter the walk-through lobby without actually having to cross over any traffic. So it's nice and safe. And I think that's actually it for my slides. Is that right? Is there another one after this one? No, I guess not. Okay, that wraps us up. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I'll turn it over to the panelists to ask if they have questions. Dana, I think you're first.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. In particular, Scott, I appreciate you showing us the evolution of, where you started and where you've kind of evolved to with conversations for the city. My only question is around the setback on the east elevation. Is that something the city requested to push the building closer to the lot line? I think it's maybe like 0.3 meters or something. And if so, was that just to have kind of a consistent street wall along Main? And yeah, I'm just curious if that was their request. I guess it's probably going to limit your ability to provide unprotected openings, but if that's what they were looking for, I'd be interested in learning more.
I do know that was the city that requested that. I know that direction went specifically to Barry's team. I don't know if they had any more to expand on the reasoning that they said in that meeting for why they wanted it to extend all the way east.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Scott, that was through discussions with the city staff. I think it's just setting up the framework for future developments once they continue along Main Street, that continuous street wall of 3 stories could be continued. So we've pushed it as close as we can to our east property line. There's a bit of a jog that you can see in the red there. I guess when the next property gets developed, it'll tie into our built form.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentations. A couple of sort of technical questions. Is the city comfortable with the way that the angular plane calculations have been demonstrated? They were breezed through it rather quickly here and presented in a way that made me wonder. But if they're according to the guidelines, then I'm good with it. Just wondering.
Yeah, no, they were according to the guidelines of the Hamilton where it needed to be to a property line. It was to a property line. And then, yeah, when it's a right of way, it's 80% of the right of way. So, yeah, they were applied as per the city guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Another question, there's a roof terrace on the 7th level, and wondering if any of that is accessible as common amenity space.
At this time, it is not accessible for amenity space. All of our amenity space is at grade for the residents and tied to the outdoor amenity.
Right. Okay. And another quick question. I know you've got a fence noted on the, I guess that would be the north and the east sides of the site where it abuts the lane and other residences. On the west and the north side, where the laneway is partly on public land, there's no fence indicated. And I know that's over your property line, but you've also got street trees on Main Street over your property line. So I'm just pointing out, I guess, asking the question, is there no intention to provide a fence there?
Sorry, just to be clear, I guess we'll take along Main Street first. There is going to be a road widening through here.
Mm-hmm.
So that would allow for the continuation of street trees along Main Street. Your question, were you referring to this portion of the lane fencing? Well, right now there is, I guess, a substandard width to a laneway provided on site. So what we're proposing is to actually stratify the width of the laneway over our underground to provide a proper 6 meter width. As for fencing for these properties here, I'm not sure if they have fencing currently or if that's going to be replaced or not. I don't know, Leanne, do you know what's happening with the fencing?
It's still a bit early days for that level of detail, but if there's existing fencing that's in good condition, it would be left. And if it is not in good condition, or if there's any need to get close to it during construction, then it would be repaired and reinstated.
Right. I ask because one of the questions asked to us from the city is there appropriate screening at the back? And so that was one point of vulnerability that I thought we should delve into. But I'll leave it there. Those are my only questions for now.
Joey.
Thanks, David. I have a couple of questions. Maybe these are for Edward. There is a project happening directly across the street from this one. What is the, well, do you know what the height and general massing is? Is it similar to this project?
I'm not familiar with the height of that project.
I can speak to that. I do know that it's 8 stories in height across the street.
Okay. And about the same length approximately, or?
Yeah, similar sort of massing. Yeah, it has the podium and then, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I saw hints of it in the package, but wasn't quite sure. And I think that sort of ties into, Edward, you were saying that this area or the infrastructure is going to change, and the project across the street and potentially this one could set precedent for that. I'm just wondering, what does that mean? Does it mean that this road is going to become more pedestrian friendly? What are the measures that the city is taking on to do that? Is there a proposal for reduction of car lanes? I did notice that in one of the drawings, it's showing allowance for road widening. So I'm a bit, I just want a little bit of clarity on that.
One project, so we have the Main Street revitalization project. I think part of that is Main Street currently is 5 lanes one way east, and in the future will be a 2-way street. It's not been decided the exact configuration of Main Street. We're still working on that. While I myself am not part of that project, I have seen a couple options that are available to the public. So I guess the statement before is right now as the one-way thoroughfare is not the most pedestrian friendly street in Hamilton. it is the goal to improve upon that. And I think the two-way is one component of that process. And along with the road widening, I think that larger sidewalks are going to be part of that equation as well. And I think that both this proposed development and the one across the street are taking that into consideration with the street fronting aspects of their design. And I think as the projects are continued and refined, those public street elements will be further refined and developed with the optic toward these pedestrian spaces.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jennifer Size.
Thank you. And thank you, Edward, Scott, Sandra, and Leanne for your presentations. I think I have two questions for Leanne, and one that's a little bit more general. So maybe Leanne, you can speak to, in the northeast corner, it looks like there's kind of a triangle of land that's maybe not going to be accessible. It's blocked off by the ramp and plantings. Is that the intent for that area?
That is part of the amenity space, and the delineation of it is really just to represent at this stage a different type of surface material to provide different experiences for people that are using that space. And so it would be accessible, to answer that question. The materiality of it, we haven't specifically sorted out yet. But on the left of that, the answer to the ramp location is yes, there would be a wall for where the ramp is going down.
Okay, thank you. And you've shown a lot of trees over the underground parking. Are these, is the intent there that these would be in maybe raised planting beds and that the parking structure would be kind of upgraded to handle that additional weight?
Typically, when we do get engaged early on with the architects and get the conceptual layout at this stage going so that there's an understanding of where there's going to be plantings, and then it gets incorporated into their design as well. And Barry and his team know the kind of depths that we need to work with, and they'll incorporate that. Sometimes if we need a little bit more depth, if there's a desire to have larger caliper trees in there, there's things that they can do with the parking rooftop elevation, or we can put trees and planters. And then when it comes to more detail with structural, there's things you can do with placement of columns and things like that to be under the more heavier components of what's happening at the surface.
So the trees that we're seeing there, kind of the larger caliper in the rendering, may not be that large when it comes down to the final design.
It's very possible that they are that large. But you know, the details of specifically what material is going in, we haven't sorted out right now, but there is a desire to be able to provide larger caliper trees there to be in line with what's happening in the neighborhood, to give it that backyard feel that I was talking about earlier.
Thank you. My more general question was the kind of the area overall is intended to be mixed use. Maybe Scott, you can speak to how you looked at maybe incorporating those commercial retail spaces and why the decision was made ultimately not to include any.
Yeah, so it is the mixed use medium density designation, but it does have multiple dwellings with just straight residential as a permitted use. So we did recognize that with that, and also the development across the street being purely residential as well, that while there is mixed use in this corridor, it can also have straight residential. We found that in this area right now, it isn't always easy to fill those spaces on the ground floor. We have another project just around the corner on an even more commercial street, Locke Street, that's had a lot of trouble filling that ground floor space with commercial leases. So it was ultimately the choice to go with the residential on this project, with the understanding that as the roads get farther along, like Edward was saying, with that revitalization project, and it gets a little more developed with two-way traffic, that there will be some more mixed use land uses along the corridor that will serve that commercial need.
Great, that's good to know. Thank you. That's all my questions.
I guess I just have a question about the topography. It looks like it's a pretty flat site. The grade change between the Main Street west side and the north side of the site, I guess, is about, it seems to generate, is that what's generating the change in floor elevation along the Main Street, or is somebody comment on that, the relative topography of the site?
Yeah, there is approximately a 1 meter rise in the topography, with the Main Street frontage being the low part, and as you go north, it rising up.
Okay, at this point, I'll turn it over to the panelists for their comments, and I'll go to Dana first.
Thanks everyone. I just want to compliment you guys on the presentation and on the strong architecture of the building. I do think it's got good proportions and good massing. Overall, I think there's a lot of work that's been put into it, and some of my comments are just around refinements in future stages. So firstly, I was looking at it, and the 9th story piece is small, and I just thought, there's opportunity in my perspective to explore maybe extending it maybe 1 unit bay to maybe pick up some units. I don't know how that will perform, but it's something that I think that could be explored. With respect to the primary entrance along Main Street, I think it can be a little bit more defined so that it's obvious like this is the primary entrance to the building. Right now, I feel like it kind of blends in a little bit, ensure that there's like weather protection, a really nice canopy, but a really great entranceway. And right now, I think you could even open it up or widen it a bit. And I know you have elevator bays and stairwells to deal with, but if there was an opportunity to like extend that view corridor directly through the site into the amenity space, I think from the street, I think that would be really a beautiful addition to the building, and would be really a strong connection between the front of the building, the entrance, and the amenity space in the back. I questioned whether or not, and it may be required from a fire perspective, whether or not a full turnaround at the back was required for a drop off, or whether like a lay-by situation could be used instead. And I think this would, limit the ability to have less space for vehicular and servicing, and more space for amenity area in the rear. And then on that, ensuring that there's adequate screening and separation between that amenity space and a lot of the area that you have from the ramp to the underground and the drop-off area, and ensuring that those two, I guess, those two parts of the site kind of work together. And lastly, my comment is just around bicycle parking. Right now, where it's placed in the parking garage, it's not very accessible to the elevators. It's more accessible to the ramps. I just think it should be accessible to both elevators and the ramps. And this could be, I think, in my opinion, easily addressed by switching it with some of the mechanical electrical storage, just to make sure there's a clear and easy access from the bike storage to the elevators. Otherwise, I think this project is nice from a massing perspective, and I look forward to how it evolves throughout the planning process. Thank you.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentations. I agree with Dana's comments now, and also the ones she made earlier. I appreciate seeing the evolution of the design over time. It helps us understand intent. I think this is a stronger design massing-wise and architecturally expression-wise. I like the strength of the podium. I think that strength that's on the Main Street facade is a little broken down on the laneway side, and I think the simplicity of it on the Main Street side could be carried all the way around, and it could be simpler back there. And on continuing on the elevation and the envelope design, the window to wall ratio in the brick part seems to be a more sustainable ratio, and less so in the white envelope in the upper floors. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. We didn't ask what sustainability measures are incorporated here, but they should be on our forefronts when we're thinking about design. So, you know, poor thermal performance in window wall when it's a you know, floor to floor and side to side in condo units, I think is an issue we all need to be responsible about. I share Dana's concern and the city's questions about the loading and drop off and garbage functions. It's an incredibly tight site. And Dana's suggestion of a lay-by instead of a turnaround might be interesting, although, and maybe that's a question we should have asked earlier about fire truck turnaround. I'm not offering a solution, it's just adding to that concern. I agree with the comment about making the lobby on the Main Street side more generous, and I don't mind it being quiet on the outside. I quite like what's been presented in the renderings, but I do think a view through the floor plate would be interesting, and it could be just simply swapping that studio unit with the residential entrance so that you do get a more like a defined room as a lobby that goes side to side in the building. Last comment, I encourage you to think about electronic vehicle parking stations, like what other initiatives are being presented here to increase the efficiency of this building environmentally. That is all my comment for now. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Scott, Cassandra, and Leanne for the presentation. I thought it was a very good graphic and also verbal presentation. I appreciate that. I also like that the panel is seeing the updated or revised scheme. It seems to me, based on Scott's comments, that it's very much helped the scheme and refined it for the better. I also, in reviewing the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment, I thought that it made some good recommendations regarding the podium and site considerations that were considered and incorporated into the design, which does strengthen it. I agree with my colleagues. This is a well-massed building that is considerate of its surroundings. The patterning and the cadence of the Main Street elevation podium bays, I think, reflect the previous rows of historic homes that were on this site before the previous car wash buildings were here. So I like that there's a kind of reference in a contemporary way to the history of this site. I also think that extending the east end of the building right to the edge of the property line or close to it with a minimal setback also sort of reflects the setbacks of the existing homes along the block. I think that that's a very nice move. The site layout is well considered and provides access to the laneway. I think that it's clear this is the north end, and how to deal with cars and how to deal with pedestrians and people living there is very difficult. I think it's a very sort of tight area on the north end. I think it was very clever in taking over the existing laneway that's there and absorbing it into the vehicular circulation, and also providing 2 points of access for vehicles. And I think that will sort of reduce the impact on the site and in the area as well. There's a couple of nice ideas here Cassandra brought up that the kind of the strength of the, or the kind of the stability and the solidity of the podium, and how as you move up the building, the materials get lighter in color. I think that works very well. I think it also reinforces the residential buildings along the block. And Leanne spoke about the amenity space being an extension of the interior. And I can't help but sort of think about this building in reference to like a single family home typology, that there's a lot of moves here that absolutely reference the way a single family home operates at a multi-unit scale. And I think that's a very clever way to handle a design like this. It's quirky on the back end. I think there's still going to have to be some resolution between how the vehicles and the pedestrians and the tenants sort of work together. But I think, I think it also references the quirkiness of the Strathcona neighborhood. And I think this will be a very nice addition to it. So thank you for your presentation. I do just want to kind of reinforce that continual collaboration with the city on the infrastructure piece, and how the new infrastructure meets the building and the front landscape will be very important to ensure the success of this building and the way the front facade relates to the public realm. Thank you.
Jennifer Sison.
Thank you. So I agree with the comments of the other panelists, and at the risk of echoing Joy, I'm really pleased to see that indoor-outdoor connection you've shown at the ground floor for the amenity spaces. I do have some concern over the visibility in the northeastern corner, particularly around the stairs to the underground and behind that ramp wall. As this design's refined, I think that should be kept kind of top of mind to resolve those issues. I also appreciate the provision of trees along the Main Street frontage, but I feel like more could be done to enhance the public realm in this area, considering that it's intended to redevelop as a very prominent mixed use area. And with that, the change that may come through with Main Street going from 1 to 2 ways, this could see a lot of redevelopment potential, and much more pedestrian friendly environment would be ideal to create in this area. So some consideration for maybe more flexible use of the ground floor units that are fronting onto Main Street, providing additional pedestrian and cyclist amenities could be incorporated into your future design revisions to help improve that streetscape. I was happy to see the sun study, although I do think it would have been really helpful if we could have seen the as of right envelope in comparison with the proposed shadow, but the overall impacts to the northwest in particular do seem to have 3 to 5 residences, maybe with no sunlight in the afternoon. So that does seem significant. It would be also helpful to understand the surrounding context with the new development that's being constructed across Main Street to know how that's impacting these residences, is more to understand what the net sun shadow impact is on these properties. The proposed patios you have on the north side are also going to be in shadow throughout the day. So any revisions through the building massing that could be done to help alleviate some of these shadow concerns would be good improvements. Overall, I'm happy to see a new development come through and look forward to seeing this built. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. So I agree. A lot of the statements made of the panelists. It's good to see how it's developed, and I think definitely it's landed in a better place. And the massing and general treatment, I think, is pretty successful. There are the issues in the loading area that are a bit congested, and trying to come up with something that maybe screens those activities from what appears to be the main entrance on the north side. I certainly agree with the idea of making the south along Main Street side a little more aligned with the North Street lobby. I think that's pretty simple improvement. But in terms of the actual street, I have some supplementary comments or observations, I guess, about the ground floor development. It seems that this is the area that really could use the most refinement in the project. I think the general massing, I think we're all feeling is pretty successful, and it's above that level. I feel that that rhythm and character of the second floor up of the podium, I think it could bring a little bit more of it down. Right now, the ground level does actually have a very commercial look to it. It's pretty much continuous setback glass facade, it appears. And in fact, it begs the question that it might eventually potentially transition to some use if the street did achieve a more commercial potential there. And in that spirit, I'm wondering whether it wouldn't be better if rather than have the meter rise along the street, whether you couldn't create a more at grade relationship on the main street, albeit with some transition layers if it remains pedestrian, but that would allow it to evolve to a more commercial use if in time the street could support it. I would also encourage the consideration of direct entrances off the street into each of those individual residents along the grade, along the main street, in order to create a more dynamic and engaged pedestrian connection. And in all honesty, it maybe even look at units that are bigger and flow right through the building on the ground floor in some locations, because I find that the northeast units that open directly onto the laneway are, I mean, that's a pretty low amenity environment to the north. And maybe if they were part of a bigger unit or even a two-story units that you often see on the bases of these buildings, if they have a grade relationship, would help to subdivide the length of that facade and add some interest along grade. Certainly the units that face along New Street have the biggest potential to maybe have an actual entry if you think that Main Street is a little too much of an arterial for that. But that would be the innovation that I would consider, is just pushing that ground floor, particularly maybe on the well, I think it would work better in terms of not having the two lobby levels and having to go up a stair in the middle of the building to make that connection. So that's the primary observation that I have that hasn't been mentioned already. I think the rest of it is, and this is obviously, I think, in the spirit of a refinement and an opportunity that you could look at that would support the long-term vitality of that street life. I think the rest, I don't really think I have anything else that adds to the comments that have already been stated. I don't know if you have any questions for us. And if you want to elaborate on your sustainability strategy that we failed to ask you about earlier, you do have a little bit of time.
Yeah, I don't have any questions myself. I was actually going to elaborate on that a little bit. So yeah, they are going to be using a geothermal heat exchange system for this building. So that's one of the sustainability features that's going to be incorporated as well. EV charging stations are being considered, as you saw, the reduced glazing, and we'll take into consideration those comments you gave about that same sort of reduced glazing approach for those higher stories. And other smart engineering solutions that can be implemented throughout the site plan stage. New Horizon Development Group always prides themselves on striving for LEED Silver, so they're always looking at opportunities for sustainability. So no fears there.
LEED Gold or Platinum is always a possibility if you want to aim a little higher. LEED Silver is pretty pedestrian these days, I have to say. So I would encourage you to look a little, as we watch the weather around us, any steps in that direction is probably a good one. So anyway, those are all great statements, and I'm glad to hear that certainly geothermal is seen as a very positive direction, and any other sustainability targets that you pursue, we did get our full support. Otherwise, thank you if there are no other questions, and good luck with further refinement on your proposal.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, members. Always appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. That will conclude our design review panel for July 13th. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.